Good morning, honey, and welcome to the capital of Greenland, Nuuk. At least, I hope that's how it's pronounced. We just pulled in like 5 or 10 minutes ago. I was hoping to get out here and get a shot of it as we came in, because the one thing that surprised me was how dark it was. It's almost 7 o'clock in the morning. You would think that this close to the Arctic Circle, the sun would stay up for an extended period of time. But I guess it's a little lazy around here. I don't know. In any event, yeah, it's still dark. We have to be up in about an hour and a half in order to go for our shore excursion, but we're just walking about the city, so that's how that goes, and it's a good thing that we're up. But it's still kind of strange to see how dark it is. Now, it's also surprisingly, I wouldn't call it busy or crowded or anything like that, but I expected it to be a small place, not unlike Kotak. But yeah, I guess I should have known better. What with a place that's 6 times the population and the capital of the country, such as it is. I mean, again, we could fit the entire country in Arlington Heights and have plenty of room left over. So there's a lot more to it than I expected, which is fine. I want to be able to see more than what we did last time. So this is just prologue. We'll see what it's like as we get out there, and in any event, keep an eye on us and wish us luck. We're going to need it. Well, we've got our story for today. We showed up late to the party and we were seated right next to the paddle, which meant that once our number was called, somebody had to pick it up and lead the party. Unfortunately, we didn't know which way it is to the gangway, and we are walking through the halls trying to find it. At this point, we're in the Centrum, and I don't know that anybody's following us at the moment. This is hilarious.
Thank you
Number
so much.
18.
Thank you for your assistance.
That was a little adventure in and of itself. Fortunately, we've managed to find our way off the ship. We know most of the ways there are, so at least now we can manage to get off, as long as we don't trip on these stairs. It's slightly slippery, partly because it's actually raining here, so that's going to be uncomfortable. As usual, we wind up in the back seat, which is fine, but at least we have a seat. This place is actually a lot more crowded than most of the buses we've been on so far. And this is kind of ironic, considering that our tour was supposedly a city walk. It's a city walk of Nuuk, so. But there is quite a hill to get up to the city, so maybe that's the point. It's a little bit more cramped than the 4x4 in Reykjavik. And it is raining, but you know, that's the way it goes. The crazy thing is, we don't seem to be the only ones disorganized in this tour. Our tour guide talked about heading to the cultural center, which is right behind us over here, and we'll be making our way there, but he was thinking as if the museum in there was basically the tour. And some of the other tour members are like, wait, no, ours is a walking tour of Nuuk. Although I'm not sure I'd complain quite so much, because the less walking we do in this slop, I'd say the better. Let's face it, we'd be more disappointed about getting this mixed up if it were a nice day to walk around. And for all I know, this might be a nice day to walk around in Nuuk. Well, it turns out that September in Nuuk is usually warmer than this. We just got a bad card today. Hopefully it'll clear up and get a little nicer, but even our guide is saying this is unpleasant. So we're going inside, despite the fact that this is supposed to be a walking tour. And we're going into the one shopping mall in Greenland. Which sounds funny, but you know, when we're talking about a country of 50,000 people and a city of 20,000, you know, in Macomb you have to drive almost an hour to the nearest shopping mall, or used to. Now that the one in Galesburg is gone, you have to go even further. In fairness, it makes sense to have a shopping center indoors here more than places back in the States, because at least we have half the year where being outdoors is okay. Now, to be fair, there's nothing to shop for at the moment because it's only 9:15, so. I wish I could tell the story of Kasisuk the way that our guide does, but I'm afraid I don't have really the time for it. And it is chilly out here, so you don't want to stay out here. In a way, he describes him as having something of a Napoleon complex. One learns that just being strong isn't enough to really make one happy in the world. You have to be able to use that strength for good rather than just to defend oneself against bullies. So we're just leaving the church here, Anasasuta Okolupa, which is basically Greenlandic for our Savior's Church. Interestingly enough, our guide points out there is rice on the ground from a wedding this weekend, which I hope they had better weather then than they did today. Oh, they did they? Okay. And over here, supposedly, is the home of Santa Claus, or where he used to live before he moved further up north. It's like every country in the Arctic Circle claims him. Alaska has North Pole. There's another place in Canada which even has a postal code of HOHOHO. And of course there's Finland that claims him as a native son as well. Anyway, we're making our way down to the old harbor and the island on which Hans Egede founded Gottab, which is what he called Nuuk back in the day, because that is the Danish word. It's only recently been officialized as Nuuk from the Greenlandic within, well, my lifetime anyway. I had to have it pointed out to me several times before I actually saw it, but the little sculpture behind me is that of the Great Mother of the Sea. I joke that it might have been created by some Danish sculptor because it's, in comparison to the sea that it's in, it's about the same type of size as the Little Mermaid out in Copenhagen. But she is supposedly the origin of the great creation myths of the Greenlandic people before they were converted to Christianity back in the 1800s. Our guide was talking about how their national day happens to be on Daniel's birthday, which makes sense because it would be the longest day of the year. Apparently one time he was standing right here at the square, and they had cannons that they let off on the national day, and he was standing a little too close. And his son was backing away, but wouldn't tell him why. I guess he's pulling a prank on his dad in that respect. He was also telling us about the national flag, the term nation being used loosely, but still, of Greenland, which is basically meant to represent a sun setting and a reflection on the water. Well, while we're walking through old historic part of Nuuk, looking at a couple of things that look kind of like stocks or pillories or maybe a printing press. It turns out this is where they would take the whales once they'd caught them, put them in there, press them, and press out the oil and fat, which they would use for fuel and food. I have to admit, this section of Nuuk, right down here by the old harbor, feels a little bit like an antique part of town, like Colonial Williamsburg or the like, except for the fact that nobody is out in any of this doing the normal tasks of the locals, as they would have been a couple hundred years ago. Then again, in weather like this, I don't think anybody wants to. It's like even the locals really don't like this weather. In the middle of this section of Old Nuuk is the historical museum with old costumes and even some film of the way of life a century or so ago among the Greenlanders. It's kind of wild to see the museum absolutely overrun with tour groups, but that's to be expected. We've literally added 10% to the town's population by being here. As we understand it, there are tours coming in at various times, and we got one of the earlier ones. So there should be a few more hours to wander about if we should so choose to. Our tour has basically left to go back to the ship and pick up another tour group. In the meantime, we're just kind of wandering around this complex that is sort of the museum area of old Nuuk. We had to stop by those things over there, wondering whether they were tires being set up or if they were a strange sort of vessel. And it turns out they were just round benches. Sometimes things that we think are exhibits aren't even that much. Likewise, just outside the Cooper's building here, we have a couple of panels that, when we saw them on a building in Kakortak, we were told they were solar panels. This is probably not a similar installation. These are actual windows, although they seem to have been blacked out for reasons. I'm actually not sure. As it so happens, these particular windows are facing north, which is the absolute worst place to be trying to pick up any sun. Not that you're going to be picking up any sun on a day like this. So, yeah, you wouldn't put solar panels on this side of the house. To be fair, most of Greenland already has plenty of power in the form of hydroelectric. They have lakes and rivers that they have plants established on, and really to power a country with only 50,000 people probably doesn't take all that much. One interesting thing is that the fjord outside of Nuuk doesn't ever freeze, except at very rare occasions. Our tour guide was speaking of one time back in 1984, before he was born. Oh, that makes me feel old. When it did. But normally there's just such an undercurrent beneath it that they don't have to worry about that. This may be Greenland, but not everything freezes. The water keeps running, and you can still generate power off of it, or at least enough to power however many people call this country home. I suppose it shouldn't surprise me that the license plates are fairly uniform, and not because they have a national designation on them, like in the EU where they all have a flag and the abbreviation of their country, but rather there is always first two letters are either GR or GL, which I'm not sure why the difference between the two, but there's a definite uniformity to it all.